Wonderful. So you will be able to access this program later on our website as well, because we will have the recording. And many of you did submit questions already to our speaker, and we have forwarded those to our speaker today. So again, my name is Shoshana Funk. I'm the Senior Director of Helping a Jewish for Good. I already introduced my colleagues. Thank you for joining us for this special program funded in part with grants from the Carolina Foundation for Jewish Seniors and the Leon Levine Foundation. Jewish for Good's Helping Department offers a comprehensive range of services that help people meet life's challenges. We deliver high-quality professional social services for adults and their families through all stages of life. This includes counseling, case management, financial assistance, food pantry, and programs like this one. Much of what we offer is free, and all of it is open to everybody, Jewish or not. For more information, I invite you to visit our website, jewishforgood.org, to look at our upcoming older adult programs we have planned, like our Shmooze and Nosh program, a Care Partner Support Group, and our Memory Cafe program. Additionally, we opened an adult day center, Begin the Center. And for those who are interested in learning more about that, you're welcome to contact me. So without further ado, I would love to introduce our speaker who we have with us today. Her name is Meike Wiest. Today's talk is called Care Management and Guardianship. Oh, sorry, she is a Care Management and Guardianship Supervisor at Arosa and the NC Triangle. And the presentation title is It Takes a Village, Build Your Care Team. So Meike is originally from Germany, where she received a master's degree in social work at the University of Lueneburg. She relocated to the US in 2005 after a career in care management for individuals with intellectual and developmental disabilities. She began her work in adult guardianship in 2012. Meike has been certified by the National Academy of Certified Care Managers and is an advanced member of the Aging Life Care Association. She is one of only 5 certified national guardians in North Carolina and a member of the National Guardianship Association. So without further ado, I will toss the mic over to you, Meike.
Thank you. I appreciate it. And I am so impressed with so many faces here early on a Monday. Very exciting to see some of your cameras on, so I'm not just speaking into a void. That's always so appreciated to see some smiling faces. So thank you for being here. I appreciate the opportunity to speak with you all. I just sent Shoshana a frantic chat because I actually did not get an email with questions prior. I misunderstood that when we chatted here prior to the meeting. So you may have to read some questions to me as we conclude the talk so I don't miss anything that folks want to know. I'm going to share my screen here so we can get started. Can you guys see that okay? Awesome. I see some thumbs up. So when I was asked to come speak to you today about aging and thriving, I was thinking, how I can best bring value to our time here today and also set the stage for the speakers that are following in the next few weeks with their topics. And so, in my role as care manager, I am a professional problem solver. I am a professional consultant that helps people plan. So planning actually gets me really excited. But one thing that we all want to do is age well and gracefully and healthily. And so I was just kind of trying to think, what are the things that are important for that? And I think these are kind of the categories that we all know about. I really believe that none of those will come as a huge surprise. They certainly are things that all of us are focusing on and should be focusing on throughout our lifespan. But as we age, that certainly changes a little bit. So, one thing that is important that we know is physical activity. As we age, that shifts. When we are younger, we are developing, we're gaining strength, we're gaining skills. and abilities that shifts as we age, and it shifts more toward maintaining what we have, optimizing what we have to stay healthy and strong, and to hopefully be able
increased about 197, almost $200.
to hopefully continue to thrive and live as healthy and independently as we want to. Staying hydrated, also something that we all know we should do. And I think in aging, sometimes that becomes more difficult. It is something that I know from a lot of my clients, either, it's hard to keep up with, it's hard to have to go to the bathroom more frequently. So, especially at night, you don't want to have to get up. So, it's something that tends to get on the back burner a little bit, but it's so important for our physical health, for our mental health, our cognitive health. Um, so certainly important. This physical aspect of aging and thriving, I think, will be picked up in one of our future presentations, especially as we speak about yoga and speaking on how staying fit, staying flexible and limber remains and becomes even more important as we age. And then you guys are all here, so you know how important it is to continue to keep learning and exposing ourselves to new things. My slide here says mind activities and puzzles and games. Those things are important, but I think it's actually more important to expose your brain to new things, to learn new things, to do things differently, one of my physical therapy friends says the greatest thing you can do for your brain and muscle memory, working together is to do routine things backwards, which I've been kind of trying to incorporate into my day here and there, which is kind of fun and surprisingly challenging and hard, but it does keep our brain limber, so it's all about brain fitness as well as physical fitness. Social connection, we are here today connecting at least through the screen, but then staying connected with friends, with families, with your faith community, with your, people that are interested in the same things. Having a connection is hugely important for thriving in your later years. Prioritizing sleep, that's a challenge for me, and I think it'll always be a challenge for me, and I think it doesn't get easier as we age, and getting good restful sleep throughout the night is difficult, but it should be something we should strive to. And again, not something that is a surprise, but very important. And then in my opinion, the biggest one is really a positive mindset. I work with hundreds and hundreds of clients, and I just had a conversation with one of my coworkers that is on this call today too, and we were kind of marveling at how different people age, how different their attitudes are, and how sometimes even people that had really difficult life stories are burdened with really challenging health situations and circumstances, but just have an inner contentment and have an attitude of gratitude, have just this positive mindset, and are very content even in a difficult situation. So I think a lot of the thriving aspect that we're talking about, aging and thriving, comes from within. A lot of the surrounding and the physical and cognitive health are important, but I think a lot of that inner contentment plays a big role in how well we feel as we age as well. And then having purpose, again, I think comes with feeling connected, keeping your mind active, staying physically involved. So all of those kind of flow together. So again, no rocket science here, but hopefully this will set the stage as we go into our presentation today, as well as into the coming presentations on yoga, on grieving change, grieving losses, on housing, which I'll talk about quite a bit, which is such an important decision. So what we'll talk about, and I'll see if for some reason my screen won't really change here. There we go. We're talking a little bit about how the time of aging and the chapter of aging can be a little complicated, as all stages are. I think, whenever we are entering a new phase of life, there's learning new things, knowledge is power. We are facing new challenges. And so the same is true as we are kind of looking at the chapter of aging, which comes with change, which comes oftentimes with, a retirement, changing your, work identity, redefining your purpose, figuring out what your days look like. It comes with creating new routines, kind of reconfiguring your life around this new chapter with more time, with um, changing family dynamics, which is kind of my next point here. As we age, families and relationships change. The family system changes with maybe now spouses spending a lot more time together as you are retiring, or potentially, just a change of still working, but maybe one of you retires, or aging solo and figuring out what that might mean. Children might be out of the house and grandchildren might be in the picture. And so lots of change in the family system.
Yeah, so I don't have that in mind. I'm going to listen to it.
We talked a little bit about staying fit and healthy, and we all try our very best. But as we age, oftentimes health changes are inevitable and they just come along with the aging journey. That's normal. Same with cognitive changes. And sometimes they can get to a point where they really impact your day to day. And if they are not now, you want to kind of think about what that could look like as you age and what might be on the horizon. And we'll talk again about planning for that a little bit today. With all of that, our priorities shift, depending on what we're doing, what we're feeling, how we're feeling, what is important to us. And based on all of the above, we're defining our goals. And those are short-term goals, those are long-term goals. And to reach those, we need a plan. And so we'll talk about it. And the revisiting of that plan, in my opinion, is important because life is a journey, it's ever changing, and the best laid out plan may change as your circumstances change, as your situation changes. You want to stay flexible in reassessing your goals and your plan and kind of adjusting it. And I, advise you to ask for guidance in that process. And one of those folks that may or may not be a helpful resource could be somebody like myself, who is a care manager or also called an aging life care professional. And aging life care professional is kind of a mouthful. We used to be called geriatric care managers, and that doesn't have a super nice ring to it. Nobody wants to really need a geriatric care manager. Plus, we're also not primarily, not only serving the elderly, we're also working with folks going through health changes in younger years. We're working with people living with a disability, with chronic mental health struggles. So there are different populations that we work with, but our focus certainly lays on that aging chapter of life. And so we are typically social workers, like myself. I have nurses on my team, gerontologists, as well as other people that have worked in this industry for a long time, that have just become experts through their knowledge, their expertise, their training, and are now coming alongside people that are aging and their loved ones, their care partners, whoever that might be, to figure out a plan. And that again can be kind of a short-term planning situation or long-term planning situation, which we'll look at. I do not say down here, if you're interested in working with an aging life care manager, say do your homework, because it is not a very well-regulated field. It's a newer field that has been emerging over the last 30 years or so. As the system of aging has evolved, become more complex and more complicated. Aging used to be much more contained within the family system, where generational care occurred or where communal care occurred. And as that has changed and things become more overwhelming at times, this new profession of the aging life care manager has evolved. It was rebranded as an aging life care manager by our professional association, which is the Aging Life Care Association. And they've kind of gotten together to try to legitimize and give our profession a little bit more structure. And members of the Aging Life Care Association get screened based on their experience, their training, how many years have they done this work. The association gathers professional references, does background checks, and just really tries to vet members to make sure that they actually have what it takes to do this kind of work. We oftentimes learn a lot as we help somebody through a difficult time, or maybe help an aging parent through years of change, and you want to share that, which is wonderful. But as somebody that has done this work for 25 years now, it's very complex because no two situations are the same. There are so many different scenarios. So you really want to make sure that you work with somebody that knows what they're doing. It is usually a private pay service. So folks hire us privately in a consultant role, and that can be a one-time consultation, or it can be an ongoing supportive relationship, on and off, ongoing, whatever it is required, which is really nice. I used to be a care manager with Medicaid, which I enjoyed, but it was very limiting. I kind of had my small window of responsibility. I had my piece of the pie that was in my area of responsibility. And anything beyond that, I couldn't really help with. And in this role, because we are hired privately, we can really work in a person-centered way and adjust out what we do to what the client needs. So I've really enjoyed that in this particular career. The fee for care management or aging life care support can vary. In our area, it's usually between $100 and $250 roundabout. In other areas like California or New York, that can be much, much higher. In some cases, the service can be covered by a long-term care policy. If you have such a policy, it would be outlined on your summary of benefits, whether or not they cover care coordination, is what they usually call it. But there may be a way to utilize care coordination services covered by your long-term care insurance, and it usually does not trigger your benefit window. It does not impact your there's no period of waiting for that. It's usually something where if it is covered in your policy, you have an annual benefit that you can use that is capped at a certain number of dollars. So, find out a little bit as to whom you're working with what are their costs, what do they provide, who are the people that you would be working with. Is it a team or is it a solo practitioner? There's lots of different options in this field. And I want to give you a tool if this is something that is interesting to you. Excuse me. Down here, you see the website for our professional association, which is the aginglifecare.org address you see here in the green square. And on that website, you'll see this Find an Expert button, which is this orange button here where you can find people that are members of the Aging Life Care Association in your area by zip code. So you can enter your zip code and a radius that you want to search, and it'll produce a list of people like myself, and it'll speak a little bit to their background, their expertise, their training, how long have they been doing it. And there are different levels of membership too, based on those criteria. So if, as we talk, this rings true to you and it looks like something you might be interested in investigating, this would be a great tool to find out more. I know not all of you are here locally in this area necessarily, so this is a national resource. Care manager can help with planning in a proactive way or in a reactive way, or assist in a reactive or proactive way. Most of our referrals come to us more as a reactive referral. Usually something has happened, something has changed, something has gone wrong. There's some kind of a crisis, and either the senior or their family members, their spouse, their children are overwhelmed with what to do and are just throwing up their hands and are seeking help. So we help in those situations. It's our, bread and butter, but nobody does their best work in a crisis moment, right? We're trying to understand what's going on. We're trying to meet the client and get to know the client in a moment of crisis. We want to understand who is involved, what are the priorities, what is important to the client, what is the issue at hand. And then we will do our very best to support folks in that situation. Oftentimes, this is a new diagnosis or hospitalization, a discharge from the hospital that is not going well. There's pressure from the hospital to be discharged, what feels like too soon, with not a good discharge plan in place. So those are oftentimes situations where people come to us, or even situations where maybe family members have just very different opinions and have gotten into a huge conflict over the loved one's care situation. Also, a scenario that we sometimes step into to help. Not always very comfortable, but it can be helpful to have that mediator in that situation. So we help with a lot of those reactive type crisis support situations where we come in. But what we want to talk about today a little bit more to hopefully avoid or be better prepared, for some of these crisis situations is the proactive planning to hopefully increase our chance of thriving as we age. So what does that look like to plan in a proactive way? These are the 8 areas that aging life care professionals are knowledgeable about. So it's our wheel of areas that we feel are very important as folks age and areas that need to be considered. I'm going to go through them just real quick, and then we'll talk a little bit more in detail about them. We just talked a little bit about the crisis intervention, and so that is certainly a big piece of what we do. Health and disability counseling, a new diagnosis. Do you have the right specialists involved in your care? Do you need recommendations for health-related trainings or resources? Do you need to better understand what to expect with a new diagnosis? So that would be this one here. I'll talk next a little bit in detail about the financial as well as the legal parts of my wheel here. So we'll get talking about that here in a minute. And then housing is a big piece of the puzzle. And I'm very excited that you have a whole presentation in this series dedicated to housing, because you'll learn why that is such a big area of importance. Family, we talked a little bit about, the beauty of family and supporting folks as they age, and they play certainly a big role. The absence of family, what does that mean? And then also sometimes the dysfunction within family, and what can that look like, and how could that potentially be helped? Local resources. We are so fortunate here in the Triangle that we live in an area that is dense with resources, but it can also be very overwhelming and confusing. What is right for me? What do I need? What does it mean? What does it cost? How do I access it? So, that is a big area of expertise for us as care managers to help people piece together a plan and plug in the appropriate resources. I sometimes describe it as I'm kind of a conductor, and I interview different players for different instruments and make sure that I have the best player assigned to each instrument. And then the care manager in their role as a coordinator kind of makes sure that everybody plays in tune and does their part and comes together nicely so that the person is supported in a beautiful melody rather than just chaos. Advocacy is a big piece of what we do, and we'll speak to that. So as we look at this wheel of areas that are important to consider as we're preparing for the chapter of aging, or we're in it and we want to get on a good path, I want to look at the legal and the financial first, because one of my theories is that having your legal affairs in order, so having an elder law attorney that is specialized in understanding the legal circumstances of people that are aging is really important. It's its own type of law for a reason, because it's complicated and there are a lot of things that attorneys need to be knowledgeable about to advise their clients properly regarding matters of aging. So having an elder law attorney, consulting with one is vital. A financial plan is important. Life is expensive and aging is very expensive. Unfortunately, a lot of services and supports are not covered by insurance. So you'll find that a lot of the resources we'll speak about are private pay. So having a financial plan is vital. And then the care manager makes up what I call the trifecta of long-term care planning. And, I like my little picture. I feel like I might need to make a cape or something of being part of this trifecta of aging. The elder law attorney will advise you regarding your legal considerations, specifically having your advance directives in place. We just passed on April 16th, National Healthcare Decision Day, where we all try to rah and get everybody over 18 to have their healthcare, their powers of attorney in place. It is hugely important, yet only about 35% of adults have their advance directives in place. And the advance directives consist of a healthcare power of attorney, a financial power of attorney, a living will that outlines your preferences at end of life, a HIPAA document that enables those that you are naming as agents to act on your behalf and interact with medical providers, as well as your legal will, that handles your affairs and your inheritance, your estate when you pass. So all of those things an elder law attorney will advise you on, as well as things as, oftentimes there's some overlap with the financial piece. Do you maybe want to consider putting trusts in place? Are there other legal considerations and financial considerations to plan for aging and to protect you as you age? And then the care manager is the one that advises toward the logistics. What will this look like in real life? What resources are out there? What costs can you expect? What are the considerations, kind of the boots on the ground considerations, which is why I get a lot of my referrals from elder law attorneys and financial advisors. Those are oftentimes people that folks work with for a long time, that they trust, and then they come to them when something changes or goes wrong. And then they oftentimes say, well, that's really outside of my area of expertise. Let me refer you to a care manager that can help you figure that out, or that can help you on kind of looking at your different care options and resources, et cetera, that you might need. We talked about housing, and I mentioned how that is such a huge consideration as you are aging and you're making a plan, because it really will kind of lay the groundwork and kind of show a path for other considerations. So I'm not going to go into great detail regarding the different types of housing, because I know there's going to be a great presentation on that. But I encourage you to attend that presentation, because it really is one of the biggest decisions. And the where options are oftentimes aging in place, and that can mean aging in your home where you've lived for 30 years. It can also mean I, want to avoid any kind of a facility setting, and I want to maybe downsize and move and buy a house in a 55 plus community that is a little bit more accessible and low maintenance, but I want to be independent. So aging in place is aging in your home of choice. And if you're kind of committed to that as a long-term care plan, you have to think through then these next questions. If you decided the where, then you want to really think through the how, meaning what are potential obstacles to aging in place? So if you are in your home of 30 years, is that home accessible? Is that home set up in a way that it is conducive to you aging there for, the coming years, even if your mobility declines, or even if, you are needing care in the home? Is it set up in a way that is conducive? But then also, how would that look like if you needed more help? And that's where we kind of go into the who, meaning as you age in place, who would support you if you are unable to do so yourself? So as your abilities potentially, they may or may not, but as they decline as you age in place, who are the people that support you? Do you have family in the picture? And what roles can they and are they willing and able to fill? So I do a lot of work with clients looking at their systems of support to figure out who in your family would be a good fit as a healthcare power of attorney and who would be a good fit for a successor. Because not everybody is cut out, to support somebody in that role. And are they local? Are they willing to do it? Are they likely to be around? Is it a friend that might be 5 years older than you and may or may not be in a good place to support you? So really thinking through who will be there to support you and what are their gifts? Who would be a good fit for a financial power of attorney? You might have a daughter that is local that would be great with the healthcare piece, but she doesn't really want to deal with the financial piece, and you might need another family member or friend to step into that role. If there is no natural support to take on that role, you might want to think through here on the bottom, what resources do you need? So, for Social Security. So, yeah.
Micah, it sounds like your video is cutting out a little bit, like the sound may be cutting out. I don't know if that's happening for other folks, but
It is
It
here.
is, it is. She's
okay. Okay, we can see you, but the sound has cut out. No, I think we lost you. I don't know if if there's something wrong with the microphone. Sorry, folks. Yes, the audio was breaking up and now it is completely out. So um let's give Micah a few minutes just to try to resolve this. And I know a couple folks asked a couple questions, and we'll make sure that those questions are asked before the end of the program. And hopefully Micah can get her sound, her microphone back working. And she can hopefully repeat the last couple minutes where it was cutting out. Thank you for your patience. We love a technical difficulty.
Wow. Can you hear me now?
Yes, now we can hear you.
I don't know what happened there. Nothing. It looks like I have good connection on my end, but who knows? I'm glad I'm back. You might have to you might have to make me co-host again so I can share my
Okay, yeah,
slides.
I will do
Apologies.
that. No worries. It's just, the technology likes to keep us on our toes just when we think we have everything figured out.
Let me know. I'm not quite sure when I faded away in my
It was like, well,
presentation.
it was about 1 or 2 minutes.
It was around when you were talking about a healthcare successor.
Yeah, it was
Thank
this
you.
slide. Yeah.
Okay. All right. Thank you very much. Yes, I think I was talking about really looking at your social network and figuring out which folks may or may not be a good fit for different roles. So, um, especially as you age in place, that is extremely important. I sometimes say to clients, if that is your plan, that is wonderful, and about 80% of people want to age in place. But then you have to be prepared that if at some point a care need arises, especially if it is a significant care need, maybe a cognitive change, something that requires significant support, it is almost a little bit like creating an assisted living in your home. And that can mean bringing in caregivers. That then means supervising those caregivers and making sure that those caregivers are coordinated and issues are addressed with caregivers, which there will always be issues. It can also mean who's going to mow the lawn, or who is going to be your house cleaner, who is going to make sure groceries are in the house. It's really kind of thinking through all those tasks and needs, kind of going back to needs and supports, the how here in the middle. You want to kind of think through and just at least have it on your radar that who would be the people I would have to fill these areas of need, which families, which friends, which people need, and where are gaps that may have to be filled with professionals. Um, I really enjoy, doing that and helping folks with developing a plan for aging in place.
The microphone was cutting out a teeny tiny bit again. I don't know if there's something like physically blocking the microphone or.
Oh, there's not.
Okay, I can still hear you. I just wanted to flag it. It was cutting out a little.
Okay, I'm gonna try not to touch anything, so hopefully it's not gonna jiggle anything. All right. Um, Another option, rather than aging in place, could be the decision to move into a CCRC, a continuing care retirement community. And I know the speaker on housing will address that more, but that is a scenario where you choose a community where that offers multiple levels of care, usually independent living, assisted living, memory care, as well as skilled nursing care. And one can kind of move up to higher levels of care if that is required. And usually there are different financial models, but it involves some kind of a financial commitment that's pretty substantial. But it also then grants usually the commitment that they will care for you in that setting as you age. I still oftentimes say, when you move into a CCRC, while you live independently, there really is still a lot of need for support and advocacy. There is oftentimes a need for somebody to support you to remain in that independent setting as long as possible. So while a CCRC offers some of those supports like meals or groundskeeping, sometimes even housekeeping, it depends a little bit. Again, you want to think through the how and then the who in that setting and what does that look like. And then the third option is a month-to-month residential option. So oftentimes folks that decide to age in place might say, if at some point that is not sustainable, or at some point this just does not become manageable, I may have to move into a month-to-month rental assisted living or a month-to-month rental memory care facility. And then the question becomes, again, what would that cost? The how? How would I find that appropriate option? What needs or supports would I have to make that move? And then also, again, the who, who are the family members, the friends, and the professionals that would help me find that new facility and help me with that transition, and then would support me in that new setting, would be there to come visit to make sure that you get the care that you need and that you're paying for, to make sure your hair gets done, to make sure your teeth are being brushed and your clothes are clean and your room is clean. So even in a facility type setting, advocacy plays a big role in making sure you have a plan. And why is advocacy so important in a crisis as well as in a long-term care plan? I think there are many reasons, but in my experience, our system is just very fragmented and very siloed. So usually as we age, there are more and more doctors involved, maybe facilities, maybe different support people that are in your life, and communication can be a big issue. So making sure that the left hand knows what the right hand is doing is very important. And there tends to be a lot of disconnect, especially during times of care transitions. So what I really love in my role now is that I can follow my clients. If my client goes to the hospital, I can make sure that they know what has been going on, that I can be there to tell them our concerns and advocate that they're being taken seriously, that tests are being run that need to, I mean, not that I'm a doctor, but I can advocate for what I believe needs to be looked into and what I find important. We can then assist with transitions. If it is time to move to a rehab facility, we can help with guiding, making recommendations for the best possible and available option. If it's not time yet to discharge, we can advocate for a longer stay in the hospital or to potentially appeal a discharge and help family members who are oftentimes very overwhelmed with those situations in an advocacy role. It can also be, once that person gets to the rehab facility, I can go there and make sure that the medical data has transferred appropriately and they know what's going on. But I can also tell them a little bit about my client and make sure that they understand what is important if my client can't at that time, or can help them understand a little bit better who that client is. So bringing kind of that personal touch to those institutional transitions is really important. And then figuring out again, what is covered, how is it covered, what does insurance cover, what does it not cover? How can we find additional funding sources? And what is truly private pay? What can maybe, what bill could maybe be appealed with the insurance company to get it covered? So all of those kinds of considerations are advocacy tasks that we oftentimes will support clients and their family members with. And again, that family support is important. So as you task family members, adult children or siblings or even friends with your support, you got to be mindful, and I know you are, that they are also juggling their own family responsibilities, their own work and community responsibilities. They may have children while also caring for an aging parent. So it's a lot to be a caregiver, and studies show that it really has negative impact on their physical and mental health if that becomes too stressful and overwhelming. So having supports for the caregiver, for the primary caregiver, is also a consideration. So the folks that you are tasking with your care, how are they going to be supported, and where can they turn for guidance and resources? And that's where we oftentimes come in as well, that we have clients that say, hey, my daughter is willing to do this, but I know she might need some guidance and support, so I want her to have your card. Or I work with clients right now that are caretakers for an adult child with a disability. So they are worried about not only their own aging plan, but then also who will slowly fill their responsibilities as a caretaker for this adult child with disabilities. And coming up with the plan there can be even more complex. So, kind of taking into account those family dynamics is important. And then I think nowadays more solo agers than we've ever had, people that didn't choose to marry, folks that are widowed, couples that never had children. same-sex couples, so many different family dynamics nowadays that have different considerations and need a different kind of plan. So again, something to keep in mind as you make your plan. And then we come back to our circle here and just want to kind of sum up what we talked about, since we are getting here, kind of moving ahead in time. But the things that we talked about was to
Oh, it's not one of the,
think
that's
through
why.
think through your own health situation. Are there specific health related issues that may already be a concern, that may already be on the horizon that you want to know more about and feel better prepared for? Or if something happens suddenly, what would be the plan? Is your home accessible to accommodate for health changes and disability related changes? Huge area. We talked about the need for a financial plan and what that might look like, which plays hugely into the housing decision and what that looks like. The family component, to think through how your family system is structured, who is best candidate for a certain supportive role, what supports do they potentially need, and then also what conflicts are maybe already there in your family system, and how could they complicate things as you age and change. I think one thing I want to stress is to have these open conversations with your support system, whether it's family or friends. If you're naming somebody as a power of attorney, ask them and then let them know, what is important to you. You would be so surprised how many people find out that they are named as somebody's power of attorney when something happens and they were unaware. Or, and in my introduction, Shoshana mentioned that I'm also a guardian, and we get appointed by the court when somebody either they have some kind of event so they can no longer make their own decisions, but they did not name powers of attorney and there's nobody stepping up in that role, then we sometimes get appointed by a court to become that decision maker. But very often, we also get appointed because somebody chose a power of attorney that is no longer living, or chose a power of attorney that has moved to Nebraska and is no longer able and available to support them, or has named a power of attorney that was unaware and really doesn't want to do it. And so, really, that's why it's such an important decision. And that's why I really stress the importance of choosing wisely when you name your powers of attorney. And then two, having conversations, really letting people know how you see your aging years, what is important to you. If you have strong opinions about end of life decisions, you want to communicate that to your children, to your friends, to your decision makers, so that there are no surprises. We sometimes get appointed because somebody named their 3 children as healthcare powers of attorney, as joint healthcare power of attorney, but then a health event occurs and they have very different opinions on what should be done and cannot get on the same page and are now fighting over where dad should live or which procedure mom should have, or how their funeral should be handled. So again, you want to make sure that the people you name will be able to be on the same page and have the information to support you. And one way to do that is to write a letter of intent and be as detailed as possible as you want to be, a letter of guidance almost, to those that you wish to speak for you at some point, to explain why you may be named this son, but not this, or to explain why you put in your living will that you do not wish to be resuscitated, or, it helps people to know that you weren't just told to check some boxes. It helps them to understand what were your thoughts, what are your reasons, what are your wishes. And it's really a gift to those that you task with your support to give them clear instructions and have very open conversations. And it's uncomfortable. Nobody really wants to talk about a lot of these things, but I think it can be very telling too as you decide how to put together your support team. You spoke about the local resources and how to access them. Again, we have so many great resources in the area. Certainly, Jewish for Good has wonderful resources and folks that can guide you. And having kind of an understanding of what's available can be hugely helpful as you kind of think through your options. We talked about the advocacy aspect and who will do that for you, and then the legal considerations. So hopefully, touching and talking about all these different areas, it will kind of give you an idea of the things that you need to think through, that you can sit down and kind of have a conversation about, potentially talk to your family, talk to your financial person, maybe engage an elder law attorney and have a conversation with them if you haven't done that. And then if you find it helpful, there are people like myself that do this every day that can come alongside you and help guide you in your plan development. And then it's usually a service that can use as little or as much as is helpful. So you may have a consultation and then not need a care manager for years, but if something changes, you have them in your back pocket and you can pull them out and revisit that supportive relationship when the time comes. So can be very helpful. And so I'm closing here with, the platitude really, but it is so true that, a goal without a plan is just a wish. I think we all wish to age and thrive and do so gracefully and in a healthy way. We all wish to live healthily in our home forever. We all wish for that. But I think having a plan and having realistic goals can be very helpful to achieve that and have the best possible outcomes. So I'll be very happy to receive your questions and to receive your feedback to, whatever you guys would like to do next.
Thank you so much, Micah. That is so helpful and informative, and just seeing that wheel, I think, is really helpful to keep those 8 arenas in mind as we age or have parents that are aging. I wanted to just go back to a couple of the questions in the chat. So the first one was, can you repeat the daily cost of care management? And I know you said there's a range, but if you could just provide that.
So it's usually an hourly rate, and usually the hourly rate is somewhere between $100 to $250 in our area here in North Carolina. I know that in California or Chicago or New York, those rates can be significantly higher. But it's an hourly rate usually that is charged, and it tends to be an as needed service. So you can pay hourly as is helpful. There are some agencies that might offer packages. You can buy this many hours for this cost. So that would be part of doing your homework to figure out what is your fee structure, what does that look like? But most commonly it's hourly.
And do you have a sense of how many hours per week is typical for what people might need? I'm sure there's a huge range, but just if you have a sense from your experience.
Yeah, absolutely. So I have clients, that I consult with. I usually do a 2-hour consultation, and then they might not need me for a long time. They might call me a year later and say, "Oh goodness, something has changed, something has come up." When I am involved in an ongoing fashion, so I have multiple clients that are aging in place at home, and they don't have family, they have long-term care insurance, and they have the resources to bring in help. But I'm usually there at least once a week for a couple of hours to make sure that the caregivers are showing up when they need to, that the house is being cared for. I might need to respond. Like just recently, we had a tree go down on the driveway in the middle of a storm. So we are the one that kind of coordinated that cleanup so the caregivers could come and go. So if we are actively coordinating an aging in place situation, 2 to 3 hours a week is oftentimes what it takes. It takes a lot to kind of keep everything running smoothly. I have a lot of clients where we serve as healthcare power of attorney, and it's more of a maintenance type relationship. And for those, we usually have a quarterly call and an annual face-to-face meeting. So again, there's so many different scenarios, and it's really client driven. So, you are the one that would tell us, this is what I need. And then we would come up with a plan with the client that is also financially sustainable, and then support clients in that manner as we agree on.
Thanks, that's really helpful. The next question is, what is an example of doing a normal task backwards for aiding brain function?
So the main one is walking backwards, and that is also much harder than you would think. So I would say do it very carefully, maybe with something to hold on to, because it is surprisingly challenging. But also to write backwards, it's maybe a little bit less dangerous and less of a fall risk. So writing backwards, trying to spell backwards or even speak words backwards. So it could be any kind of activity like that you can deconstruct and do in reverse order that apparently is extremely healthy for our brain. And even changing up routines. I think we are all such creatures of habit. And so we are so used to doing things a certain way. And sometimes just switching that up a little bit can also keep our brain on its toes and kind of keep things flexible. So that could be, rather than getting your coffee first thing and, going to check your mail, you're going to do that in reverse, So, I mean, that's a silly example, but just mixing things up and trying to break routines can be helpful in keeping the brain flexible.
Putting your left shoe on before your right, or taking a different route to the store, or, I've heard those kinds of things too. Yeah.
Yeah.
And the next question was, what if you are in a facility, independent in a CCRC, and family is 3,000 miles away? And I don't know if Roxanne, you want to add anything more to your question, or if you just want her to speak broadly kind of about that kind of situation.
Well, I think broadly right now is good. Certainly there are a lot of specifics.
Well, I speak on it broadly, I mean, my parents are aging in Germany. So, it's a similar situation where we're very close. We talk a lot. We have a great relationship. But if something were to happen, I'm not going to be able to be there as quickly as I would like, and I'm not going to be able, if I have a concern about something, to just check in. So you best believe I've already kind of researched people like myself in my parents' area, because we can oftentimes be the boots on the ground and the eyes on the person. So it's really nice for long distance caregivers, very comforting to have somebody local that they can call on. So even if it's not a current need, establishing a relationship with somebody, maybe getting on their books by doing an initial consultation and getting to know each other, and then providing their contact information to the out of town family member can be really comforting. I recently had a client, the son called me, lives in Texas, and he called me and said, Dad, who is caregiver for the wife with dementia, was hospitalized with a cardiac event. And so now there was mom with dementia sitting with him in the hospital with nowhere really to go. And so we were able to step in and kind of help coordinate care for the wife, check in on dad, provide updates to the son. And then the son was able to come down and be there a couple of days later. But again, having those boots on the ground and having somebody to call in and task with, whatever is needed can be very helpful. Does
Let
that
me,
answer your question?
yes and no.
Okay.
I'm the one that would need the care.
Okay.
And my family, who's my POA and everything else, happens to be, he's younger. They're all out west.
Mhm. Mhm. So it would be, a similar scenario rather than, and again, it doesn't have to be me, of course, but, connecting with the care manager and, having them to get to know you, having them to get to know your family, and getting them connected, making sure they have each other's contact information so that if something were to happen to you, there is already kind of a support system established so that your family could call that care manager and say, Roxana's not answering her phone. Can you go by there and knock on the door? Or, Roxanne went to the hospital. Can you go check on her? And can you make sure that you bring her hearing aids that she left at the house? There's so many scenarios where you might need some boots on the ground to do whatever is needed to make sure you have what you need. And so for them to know who to call upon is really a gift to you as well as to them.
Thank you.
Mhm.
And I'm gonna skip to this question that was just asked because I think it's related, and it's related to the proactive versus reactive piece that you were talking about. But is it routine to interview potential care managers before hiring them?
Absolutely, you can do that. Any care manager that you're interested in working with should be willing to at least have a free phone call, or maybe even jump on a video call like this one to answer questions that you have. And then and I think that makes a lot of sense because you want to find somebody that you have good chemistry with, that you feel comfortable with. So absolutely. I think the tool that I gave you with the website allows you to kind of pre-screen who appeals to you as a potential support person, but then they all should be willing to have a free, brief meet and greet, at least virtually.
And then what if you have no family other than your spouse? I think you spoke to the solo agers. So can you speak a little bit more to that?
Yeah, I mean, I think especially if you have, if you have a spouse, then you're still aging together, but it's not guaranteed that you're aging at the same speed and at the same, in the same way. So being prepared and thinking through what it could mean if if one of you gets ill and the other becomes a caretaker, how would that how would that impact your life, and how would you support the spouse that becomes a caregiver? Or, what does that look like if one spouse predeceases the other? Who would step into the gap for the well spouse or the surviving spouse? So again, it's really important to have successors when it comes to healthcare power of attorney and financial power of attorney for that reason, because I named my spouse, but then I named a friend should he predecease me, so the same is true at any age. We want to have a backup plan. And then two, if one of you becomes a caregiver, ensuring that that caregiver has support, that that caregiver has an opportunity for respite, and that, can be achieved in many ways. And a care manager can kind of help you figure out what resources are there, to support the caregiving spouse. And if you're both well, we oftentimes serve as a successor healthcare power of attorney. So if spouses name each other and then feel they don't really have an appropriate successor, there are professional surrogate powers of attorney that can step into that role. There's a charge usually for that service. And so it's something that you have to talk to your financial folks about to make sure it fits into your long-term care plan financially to employ those professionals in a supportive role.
And then lastly, there's a question in the chat that says, I can appreciate that I can make these choices for myself, but what about my in-laws who refuse to discuss anything and just say, we are fine, and the closest family is 3.5 hours away?
I know, and that is so hard. That is really so hard. I think, we sometimes have success in, and, we don't come with a magic wand, but we do sometimes have success in children saying, hey, I met this person for my own peace of mind. Can we have a family meeting about this? And they may or may not agree. But sometimes coming from we're not doing this for you. We know you're fine. We know you're good, but I'm doing this for me. I'm really anxious about this. I need this support. Sometimes the reluctant senior may be more accepting and more willing to speak about those topics when they know they're doing it for somebody else. So that might be an approach. But it's very common and very difficult. And I think sometimes just trying to say, hey, if we have those conversations now, it's much more likely that you have a good outcome. And yeah, it's hard.
It can be a process.
Yes, it
Mhm.
can be a journey. And unfortunately, in some instances, it becomes a reactive kind of situation. Sometimes something has to happen. Hopefully it's something more minor, that will trigger their awareness that it is helpful to have those conversations and to have a plan. But yeah, sometimes something has to rock the boat a little bit before that mindset can shift.
Any other questions that have come up from the presentation today, or anything that you have in mind that you'd want to pick Micah's brain about before we end? Oh, Cheryl, go ahead.
I am curious about any linkage between Jewish for Good and the kind of work that Ms. Wiest was talking about. Do you work together? Do you refer? How would, if we did the portal of entry through you, how would this work?
Great question. So Jewish for Good, we of course have a helping department. We do not provide aging care management. However, we can provide general information and referral. So we might, direct you to that website that Micah was talking about that has the list of care managers in our area. Or we might say, here's a few agencies that provide this service, and we may be able to certainly have a conversation about like what your concerns are, and maybe there's a care partner support group that might be helpful, or we need an elder care attorney, right? So we can provide general information and referral, but we're not going to be doing the in-depth sort of boots on the ground like Micah was talking about with that ongoing dynamic and relationship. Certainly we are here to provide support and resources, but in a less in-depth kind of way, I would say.
Somebody had asked for me to put my contact information up again, in the chat, so that's why it popped back up.
Yes, thank you for sharing that. And I also want to put into the chat that there are other resources that Micah has provided, as well as your contact information, that I will put into the chat here. This is where the recordings will be. Once the program is done, if you want to refer back to the recording or share it with someone that you know and love, like your in-laws, for instance. Oops. And yes, so all the resources will be there, Micah's contact information, the videos, and we will send out an evaluation about today's presentation at the end of the week. So if there are no other questions, I would love to thank Micah so much for your experience and information, and your way of sharing the information today was very accessible and relatable, and we appreciate the work that you do and the information that you've shared today. And we appreciate
Thank you for having me, and sorry again for the tone difficulty here. So I'm not sure what happened there.
It's okay. It's all keeping us awake and alert, and we're doing the best we can here. And I want to thank everybody on the call today for your participation and for joining us. It's so lovely to be able to come together and to try to think through these difficult questions together. So we hope to see you tomorrow at day 2 of our Aging and Thriving conference. Thank you all so much for coming today.
Same link for tomorrow?
Stacy we will send out the link in the morning.
Okay, thank you.
Around 9:30, about an hour before the program starts. That way it's fresh in your email.
Will it be a different link? Because it said this morning, come back to this one for the rest of the week.
Either way, I think it's a different link. That's a great question. I think it's a different link, but
It's a different link. I don't know what, who sent that? We'll talk about that later. Yeah. I don't know what email you're referring to, but yeah, it's a different link each day.
The different link each day, and we will send it out in the morning of each program. It starts at 10:30. We'll just let folks sign off, and then Mike, I just want to debrief for one moment.
Do you want to stop the recording, Shoshana?
Yes, great idea.